Hi, this is Frank,
And this is Tim,
and we just stepped into
the Vactor-Verse.
I am Vactor, and this is the Vactor-Verse. I have two very special guests on the show today. A couple of guys, a couple of beers, and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia. The host of my favorite geek podcast in the world, two geeks who geek out over a couple of ungeeky beers, Tim and Frank from Beer with Geeks. Welcome to the Vactor-Verse, my friends.
Thank you for having us. It's always an honor to be even close to the Vactor-Verse, never mind on the Vactor-Verse.
It is an honor and a privilege to be here.
You guys, not only are you great friends, great fathers, great husbands. I'm not married to you, but I'm pretty sure you guys are great husbands. I just cannot tell you guys how great you are in all aspects, but you guys are great podcasters and great comic book fans. So I'm very pleased to have you here in the Vectorverse. You've been a guest on my show before, back when it was Comic Book Kaiju, but I said I got to get these guys into the Vectorverse because what's funny? So full disclosure, Frank has not seen Across the Spider-Verse yet, but Tim has. So I used to say, I want your guys' comic book origin story. But from now on, from this day forward, I will be referring to them as canon events. And Frank, you'll see that in the Spider-Verse. But I wanted to get these two geeks on to get their canon event. What got them into comic books? And since I met Frank first, I'm going to ask Tim. Tim Gannon, what was your canon event?
You want what got me into comic books or like what got me into superheroes? Because I think those are two different things.
Let's get both. I want to hear both because I've never asked you this. I've known you for 900 years and I've never asked you this question before. So I'm curious for both.
A long time to train Jedi, 900 years.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Go in chronological order. Which one came first, superheroes or comic books?
So superheroes came first, I think, as it did for our generation, and you know, like you're just kind of like whatever was shown to you first. I feel like that's kind of your entry point, and so mine was. So just full disclosure, my daughter is like 10 feet off camera, so you might hear a 1-year-old at different points. Currently she's saying Zinny Bed, which is our dog's name, and so she's tapping the chair because she knows the dog likes the chair. But anyway,
if she flies by with her cape flowing in the wind, I'm gonna go crazy.
Yeah, she might be making an appearance on camera in about a second, so which is okay. You want to be on camera?
Eloise.
There she is. Oh.
Yay!
Hey.
Say hi.
Training the next generation of geek right here, Eloise.
So she was actually sitting in her chair reading a Star Wars book and a Superman book, and so like, yes, we are training the next generation.
That is perfect.
Yeah.
Tim has sent so many videos of her.
Yeah, she's good. She's good people, right? But that's your Uncle Frank right there. Yeah. He didn't hear you because I have headphones on, so it means nothing. But anyway, so my first thing that I absolutely definitely watched was the Adam West movie.
Ooh, yeah.
And so that was I would argue the canon event was like, being put in front of the TV and say, you will like this. And I said, yes, I do like this very much. And then it was like the Adam West and Burt Ward animated show. Like we would go to Blockbuster, the VHS of that. And then we actually also got the Superman one at the same times because I remember like liking the Brainiac episode of the Superman one, and then but then I also really liked the like Penguin and Riddler and Joker and Catwoman of the animated one. I actually have more vivid memories of watching that than of the Adam West live action movie. And then I also want to say, and then the Fleischer Superman cartoons, which we
Yes.
had on tape. Probably, I think it was like Frank kind of like knows when his came about. I know his story, but like I'm pretty sure mine just materialized in the house one day. I have no idea where it came.
It was Tim from the future, the reverse Ganon. He came
placing it into the
Oh man.
reverse Flash style, but not evil, right?
He
Yeah.
created
So
himself.
yeah, so those are the things that got me in, and then like some other television shows, like Batman the Animated Series or X-Men and Spider-Man on Fox Kids. Those certainly went. Superman the Animated Series. Those go a long way. Fantastic Four,
Ooh.
the Hulk, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man. I used to love all of that stuff. And then
Mm.
I'm old enough that I remember. I mean, you guys are the same age, but like when the grocery store used to sell comics. And
Yes.
so I remember being in line with my mom and with my brother, and there was Marvel Reborn was like doing its thing.
Oh
And
wow.
so we like got a couple of those, but it was a Fantastic Four issue, and it had Black Panther in it, and Super Scroll, and Doctor Doom, and the Hulk, and like all this stuff, and it was Jim Lee art, and like I didn't know but I knew these characters because of those cartoons, and then so I was just like totally in. Yes, that's a picture of mommy. Very and so say it for the microphone. No, she won't say it for the microphone. I apologize that the Vactor-Verse has been bombarded.
It's been Ganonized.
Yeah. And so yes, ma'am, there's a picture of mommy. Go get your Superman book. Go get your Superman book for me. And she's off. Incidentally, Superman of Smallville is an excellent kids graphic novel.
Ooh.
Just so everyone is aware.
Can confirm.
It
Nice.
is age appropriate for every. There's like nothing bad in it at all. It's so good. And so so anyway, so those were like the comic events, and I remember getting like comics for my birthday one year, and this was like Clone Saga Spider-Man. So it was like Ben
Ooh.
Reilly fighting Mysterio,
Yes.
and a couple of Batman the Animated Series comics, and I like, but none of those like it never made me like I need to get the next one. I need to get the next one. I need to get to the next
Right.
one. That never really happened for me. Even I do have going back to like the grocery store. I remember getting Peter Parker Spider-Man number 50, The Return of the Green Goblin, and The Death of Ben Reilly. Like easily my most treasured comic book ever. And John Romita Jr. art. It was just like explosive. Kind of changed my like how much I love the thing, like that's kind of how like you have that thing, like I liked Star Wars, and then the Phantom Menace came out, and then I loved Star Wars, like so that turn event was definitely Peter Parker Spider-Man number 50. And then I was in high school, I was working at Blockbuster, and a friend of mine Palmer, who I do Academy Rewind with on Thoppable Audio Network, he came in to the store and he was like, Wonder Woman killed Max Lord. And I was like, that means nothing to me, but tell me more. And so he started bringing me the books that he was reading, like, and that was about that was the same time as the return of Jason Todd.
Man.
And just like kind of getting into Infinite Crisis. And that's where I started to go to the store and pick up books on a weekly basis. And that just has continued forward to this day. So I was 16, 17. So you're talking like almost 20 straight years of reading comics.
Man, I love hearing that. And I also love the kind of whenever I have a guest on and I get their canon event, I love hearing the time frame and the environment that they grew up in, because everyone is shaped by all these, external forces, and everything comes together to create this comic book fan. So when I think about Tim Gannon, now I will have all of these memories of how he was formed. So this is fantastic. Now let's get to the man with the plan, the most rambling man on the internet, Frank Ramblings, what is your canon event?
My canon event happens to coincide with my first memory
Oh,
period.
oh wow.
I remember, and I may have been exposed before this, but this is the first I remember. I remember being exposed to Superman the day my younger sister was born. I was 3 years old.
Oh
And it's my
wow.
first memory because I got a sister. But I remember that the day she was born, my parents gave me, a couple of presents because I wasn't the only child anymore. And one of those presents was a VHS of the Superman Fleischer cartoons
Yeah.
that I wore. I played that tape to death. Destroyed it. Have since owned other copies, but I absolutely fell in love with Superman in particular and superheroes in general that day, over 30 years ago. And I then remember watching a lot of the George Reeves series. I had a tape with my dad had taped a marathon of that show off of TV, so I had a bunch of those episodes that I watched a lot as a kid. And then the Superman the Animated Series came out. I remember the night that premiered. The 3-part movie length event, and watched that show for its whole run. And dyed in the wool, huge Superman fan, from age 3, and remains so ever since. So that was how I got into superheroes and Superman in particular. I really got to like Spider-Man a lot. Growing up in the 90s, you had a lot of Spider-Man content on TV and in a lot. I owned a lot of action figures of Superman and Spider-Man and some Batman, and I had the Batman Forever Batmobile. I remember when that movie came out, and it was I was probably like first or second grade or something, or maybe third grade when that movie came out, and it was a big exciting summer. And then I remember, fast forward, I'm a huge Superman fan for years. Fast forward a few years to when I'm right around the time I'm starting high school, somewhere around that, and I started visiting my local comic shop with some friends. They were into manga, and I was sort of tagging along. I wasn't really a comics reader yet, but they were there for manga, and I was looking around, and I spotted Superman Red Sun.
Ooh.
And it was like at the checkout counter, like it was on the way out, and I asked the owner, like, what is this? And he was like, oh man, you got to read this. Like, this is so good. It's like what happened if Superman landed 12 hours later and landed in the USSR instead of the USA. And I was just just the concept of it like was so interesting to me that it pulled me in. And that's the first comic I really remember reading for real. I'm sure I browsed others before that. I probably browsed some Superman, like newspaper comic strips from back in the day and that kind of thing. But that's the first one that I remember really like being like, okay, I'm going to read a comic for real. And that was probably when I realized that comics were more than just comic strips, that there was more substance to them, or could be more substance to them than the comics that I sort of than like golden or silver age comics, let's say,
Right.
which was
right.
sort of my stereotypical idea of what comics were. Realized I was wrong about that, and so I that was my gateway, and from there I started reading around the era that Tim's talking about. We're only a couple of years apart in age, but the Infinite Crisis era. I around that same time I started getting into Smallville, and from there I was following a lot more internet communities, Superman based internet communities. And I remember people talking about things like Crisis on Infinite Earths and Infinite Crisis and Identity Crisis and all these other events that happened in between. And I was like, I want to know more about this. What's 52? What's Final Crisis? What's all this stuff? So I really went back and caught up on years of events and DC canon. And really that's when I really became like a DC fan more broadly, and
Mm.
really fell in love with the universe, the characters. I became a big Hal Jordan guy around that time. I was already a big John Stewart guy from the Justice League series. But Hal, I was like, oh, okay, this was like the one of the, well, not the first, I guess, but the one of the longest running. Cool. Like, I was learning a lot about all that stuff. The Jeff Johns Superman Action Comics run was happening around that time, and I was just absolutely in love with that run. Actually, it was around that time, Vactor, that you and I met, and I started doing Superman bits for your podcast at the time. We were doing like monthly, like, here's what happened in Superman this month.
Man, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was man, that was a
years
great
ago.
time. Yeah.
So that was a great time in Superman comics. Great time in Smallville was on, and all these. It was a great time to be a fan for me. And I haven't been a monthly reader consistently ever since. I've fallen off the wagon a few times and gotten back on, but I have been a huge DC fan ever since, and obviously goes without saying that like the Marvel movies the last few years have been huge, and I've absolutely loved those. But like my first love was Superman, and was the DC characters, and I just I absolutely have been have been a huge fan ever since. But that's how it all started.
Oh man, that is fantastic. And I love, like I said, hearing the time period of when you got into it, and then hearing you name those stories. I can picture exactly what, where I was, and then what was going on in comics at that time. So, and we also have kind of a similar journey, I think, because Superman was the first superhero that my dad, I think, placed in front of me, because I don't have a specific memory. I just remember him always being, oh, it's Superman. He's always there. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. They've always been in my life. And then the Superman Red Sun experience that you had, I had kind of a similar experience with Speeding Bullets, which was the Superman
nice.
as Batman, or what if Batman was Superman, and I saw that
where he's got a full face covering and he's in a Batman costume, but the bat crest is in the shape of the Superman crest.
Yes.
Yeah,
And it's that one of those iconic Superman poses, one of those iconic covers. And when I saw it, I was like, what is this? My mind was blown, kind of like Frank with the Red Sun. I said, I have to read this. And then that was kind of the period of when graphic novels and trade paperbacks were first kind of coming in. And before that, it was like, oh, if you missed it, you missed it. It was kind of like reruns on TV, like if you missed the episode, there was no internet, there was no on demand stuff. So the trade paperbacks were huge for me, because I was able to catch up on like the Venom arc and Spider-Man and all these different things on Superman, and things that I was not reading at the time. And I did, like Frank, I did kind of like a deep dive on a lot of the characters. And especially when I got into podcasting and I got into talking about comics on a regular basis. And then when I discovered that you could get comics for free from your local library, that was another huge moment for me, as well as when I discovered, oh, there's other people talking about comic books on podcasts. So all of those things kind of shaped me. So it's cool to hear these stories, because like I said, I'd never asked you guys. I've known you guys for decades, and I still just did not know a lot of your origin stories. And we've both of you two have hosted separate podcasts with me before. So we have like a huge connected web of podcasting and comic books. And I think we all love Marvel, but we have a DC connection as a core element to us. I think Superman and Batman, those are the two things that we have kind of locked in on it and come together on. So yeah, it's always great just to hear how you guys got into it, and also to see, because you guys are one of the two people that I talk to the most about superheroes and comic book properties, whether it's a movie or television show. So I always have a good time when I'm talking to you guys, and I love picking your brains and just getting your take on something or your knowledge about something. So thank you very much for just being you, both of you two, and I want to also get your Beer with Geeks canon event because, like I said, this is my favorite geek podcast on the internet where Frank and Tim, they just talk about whatever is going on in pop culture or whatever they've been enjoying that week. So I'm very curious because I think I don't know if I was or what I was doing when Beer with Geeks started. So I want to hear how it came about.
I can start, and then Tim, I can hand it over to you because I what I remember is I moved from New York, where I'd been living my whole life and where I grew up. I moved up to Boston when I met the woman who would eventually become my wife, and I got a new job and moved my life up to Boston. And Tim lived near Boston, and Tim was my only friend already in Massachusetts, and so I was excited, like, hey, we'll get to hang out more. And we maybe for a year or so we saw each other every few weeks, sort of found a reason to see each other as much as we could. And then Tim, you were going off on a trip.
Yeah, so I was going to China for work for 2 weeks, and I said to Frank before I left, I said, we should do a podcast together. I'm going to China for 2 weeks, so let's here's like the seed of the idea, and let's talk when I get back. And Frank said, all right, so let's each come up with 50 topic ideas on our own in 2 weeks, because the assumption is that if you could come up with 50 topics, 50 episodes, even if they overlapped a little bit, like obviously we'd end up talking about some of the same things, but if we had 50 ideas, then we could get roughly 50 episodes out of the podcast, and therefore we could probably get 50 more and 50 more and 50 more, and now we're over 450 episodes. So like clearly it worked. Like that was a great idea. And so I actually don't really remember the inception of why Beer with Geeks, especially. Like,
Yeah.
I don't because we were going over each other's houses, and we would basically cook dinner for one another and just hang out and talk about stuff that we were interested in. So we just took that core concept and turned it into a show. I think that's really where it came from.
Yeah.
Without the dinner part, we would just eat dinner first, and that because at the time we were both single. We weren't married. We were living on our own, so we had the time. And so
Dinner
we would
with geeks.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
We thought that this was the days before ASMR, so this was back in the days of the USSR. So, you're welcome. So like we did think about like, oh, people would love to hear us eating close to the microphone.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, that did not dawn on us at the time.
No.
Back in 2014 or what? Yeah.
I mean,
so
we were doing it before, like when podcasts were like still kind of fringy. They were still like,
yeah, it was still
like they became like commercialized. Really,
yeah, it was still very much a hobbyist thing, And we'd all been doing podcasts for years before that. Even I guess Tim and I had both stopped for a few years, for various reasons. But I remember looking for and I think I'd mentioned this to you, Tim. I was looking for like the right show concept, like to sort of be able to get back into it as a hobby now that I had time for it again. And I think that stuck somewhere in the back. That I planted the seed somewhere in the back of your head, and then you were like, all right, I'll do a podcast with you. Here's what we're going to do. Like, I'm going for 2 weeks, and when I get back, we're doing a podcast.
We're doing it. Well, because the both of us had podcasted separately. Like Frank had a few. He did one with you. I did one with you and Hunter Camp. So like we were, Frank knew more, but like at least like we were comfortable with the medium ahead of time. And so it was the hardest part. I think like if you go back to those very first episodes, we were like lowballing, like here we are in my kitchen with one Yeti mic in the middle of us. And like 2 or 3 episodes in, we were like, this is no good. We can't do it this way. And so we pretty much just stepped up our game from there. And it was COVID that allowed us to kind of keep going, because as Frank like slowly moved from New York all the way up to New Hampshire. Like you just kind of kept going up to New England, up to like the edge of the United States.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
I got close to Tim, and then I started getting further and further away from Tim, and it was getting hard for us to meet
that's
up.
correct. But because all of a sudden like video recording became not just available but easy to record on all ends, we've been able to keep going even though we don't live in the same state. Just much easier than we used to have to do it, because I mean, you remember we would all be on like Skype or something
Oh,
like that,
yeah.
and you'd have
Right.
to like you'd be sending people like audio files and different
Yeah.
different
Man.
different things, and it was such a pain. But now it's much easier, and so and truthfully, we like this is not so much the origin story of the Canon event, but like we keep going just because we can.
Mm.
Like we don't really care at this point. We don't care about numbers or accolades, or even if anybody really cares about the topic anymore. We've been doing it for so long that because we've had other shows, right? We've we've talked to like directors and cast members of Supergirl, and which was fun, like multiple
Yeah.
actors and directors and writers and all this stuff, and like that was almost, I felt like that was kind of the heyday. We did it, we put our we did our time, and now we're coasting.
Yeah, I mean, now we've since gotten married, and we have kids, and separately. We're not married to each other, but life changes, takes you different places, and but Beer with Geeks has been a constant in that time, and from when we were both unmarried to now we're both married and each have a kid, and live in different state. Each of us lives in a different state than when the show started, and
Oh yeah, I moved too, right? Yeah.
yeah. So like but it's cool. It's our weekly appointment to hang out. It is two friends, and it is our weekly sort of excuse to hang out, and even at the beginning, that's kind of what it was here is a structured reason for us to get together. At the time it was in person, now it's over Zoom, but like it was a structured like excuse to be like, all right, we're gonna get together every week to do this, and we'll hang out around it, but like here's our excuse to make time on the calendar, and we still do it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
it's great. It's great.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I have something similar. A lot of times it's video games where, okay, let's get together, play this game on
Yes.
this night, and we can talk while we're playing, and it's just kind of a hangout and a meetup. And I don't go to bars and nightclubs. I play video games and I podcast. Those are my
Yep.
my vices. So I can definitely relate to that. And having a structured hangout is so important because there's been people that have kind of fallen off. I don't talk to them as much just because we didn't have a structured, this is the time we're going to talk each week, this is the time we're going to meet up. So yeah, I can relate to that 100%. And I'm glad that Beer with Geeks is still going. I think out of all the friends I've had and all the podcasters I've known, you guys have the longest running podcast, the most consistent one. So kudos to you. And I will always have a spot for you guys, no matter what podcast I'm doing. But my current venture, the Vactor-Verse, anytime you guys, I really want to get a DC animated roundtable going where we can, every time there's a DC animated movie, our schedules haven't aligned 100%.
If not, but
for
I'm there for that. I watch every single one. So except for the RW, that one had that
I
was
was just about to say the most recent one.
So that's true. Like out of almost 40 movies, it's like the only one that I was like, no, not it's clearly not even like it's not meant for me. Like I'm not familiar with the other side. It's not a subgenre that I care about, and I'm still watching Next Generation. I have not watched anything unless it's with my wife. I have not watched anything else but the Next Generation, and so I'm already season 3. Like I'm plowing
Nice.
through because I want to get to season 6 and then do chronological DS9 with Next Gen to then get into Void. So start switching it all up. So I'm like plowing through as much as I can.
you have got me chomping at the bit to talk about Star Wars and Star Trek with both of you. So we also have to find time to have that discussion in the future. Frank, are you interested at all in that? It's DC RWBY. Are you interested in that at all? Do you have any interest?
I could be convinced.
That's the thing.
As a structured excuse to hang out with my friends, I'll watch anything.
That's a good point. Yeah, I would do that. I mean, they're also like 75 minutes. So like the commitment of watching one is really small.
Right. Yeah. I still haven't watched it yet. I bought it, but I haven't watched that. And then I always love watching the special features on every single one. And I still haven't watched the Batman. What is it? Gotham?
Doom that came to Gotham.
Yeah, I still haven't watched the special features on that one yet.
Me either. Actually, normally I have like a system. I'll watch the what's coming next thing first. Then I'll watch the movie. Then I'll watch the behind the scenes.
Yes.
But Doom That Came to Gotham didn't have what was coming next, and it just threw me for a loop. I don't even know if I actually finished Doom That Came to Gotham. Now that I think about it, that is not.
We sound like a bunch of guys who have kids.
We have to get together and talk some more DC animated in the future. But Tim and Frank, I cannot thank you enough for joining me here in the Vactor-Verse today. I'm going to have the link to Beer with Geeks. Everyone check them out. Check out all the things that they're doing on Thought Bubble Audio and everything that Tim and Frank are creating in the world and putting out into the internet. I want you all to check them out because these guys are, like I said, not only are they great fathers, husbands, people, men, podcasters, they're just great guys in general. So I love everything that is Tim and Frank. So you guys should check them out and be on the lookout in the future for more appearances from the Beer with Geeks because we got to talk some more Star Wars, Star Trek, DC, Marvel. Everything is going to be coming up. Beer with Geeks, and I'll have a root beer on our next episode. So thank you very much for joining me, my friends. I want to let everybody know that Tim loves comics, Frank loves comics, and you should too.